Off the coast of Georgia, where the salt marsh gives way to the Atlantic, there is a shallow, muddy body of water called Wassaw Sound. Shrimp boats work it. Herons wade in it. And somewhere in the silt, at the bottom of it, lies a hydrogen bomb. The United States Air Force put it there on the 5th of February, 1958. Not on purpose, but not quite by accident either. They dropped it from a crippled bomber to save the men on board, and then they went looking for it. They searched for nearly 10 weeks, and they never found it. It is still there tonight. This is the story of how America lost a thermonuclear weapon off one of its own beaches, and then, very quietly, learned to live without it. The Lost Bomb, Tybee Island, 1958. To understand how a nation misplaces a hydrogen bomb, you have to understand the year 1958 and a machine called the Strategic Air Command. 13 years after Hiroshima, the United States and the Soviet Union stood locked in a nuclear standoff, and the American answer to that fear was to keep bombers and crews ready to launch, while training relentlessly for a war no one wanted to begin. Around the clock, bombers stood alert while other crews flew long simulated combat missions, practicing navigation and electronic bombing until the routines of nuclear delivery became second nature. The weapons aboard those training flights were not always simple dummies. Sometimes crews carried actual bomb assemblies, often without their nuclear capsules, to reproduce the weight and handling of a combat load. On the night of February the 4th, a 35-year-old pilot named Major Howard Richardson lifted a B-47 Stratojet off the runway at Homestead Air Force Base in Florida. His mission was a simulated combat run, a long, looping night flight of the kind he had flown many times, practicing the delivery of a nuclear weapon on a distant target. And in the belly of his aircraft rode that weapon, a Mark 15 hydrogen bomb, 12 feet long, 7,600 pounds, serial number 47782. It was the first relatively light thermonuclear bomb the United States ever built, and its full design could yield a blast measured not in tons, but in millions of tons of TNT. There was nothing unusual about the flight. That was the entire point of it. Men like Richardson flew these missions so often that the extraordinary, a 7,600-pound thermonuclear bomb over the sleeping cities of the American South, had become ordinary, a matter of checklists and fuel and radio calls. Decades later, when the world wanted to know how such a thing could happen, Richardson kept returning to that same simple fact.
This was just a practice mission. We were continually working out any problems. That is why we had to practice. We wanted to be perfect. Colonel Howard Richardson, remembering the flight, 2009.
By the small hours of February the 5th, Richardson's bomber was cruising at 38,000 feet in the darkness above Georgia. Far below, Savannah and its sea islands slept. But Richardson was not alone in that sky. As part of the same night's exercise, fighter pilots were being scrambled to practice intercepting incoming bombers on radar to find them in the dark, close the distance, and simulate a kill. One of those fighters, an F-86 Sabre, was flown by a young lieutenant named Clarence Stewart. He was hunting Richardson's plane, and in the blackness, guided by a ground controller and his own radar, he closed on it far too fast and far too close. What happened next took a fraction of a second. Stewart's fighter came down out of the dark and struck the bomber, tearing through the B-47's wing, crushing an engine and folding the smaller aircraft against it. The Sabre was ripped apart. Stewart, his plane disintegrating around him, reached for the one chance he had and fired his ejection seat, blasting clear of the wreckage into the freezing night. His parachute carried him down near Estill, South Carolina, miles from where the fighter finally fell to earth. He lived. Above him, Major Richardson was fighting for the lives of his own crew in an aircraft that had suddenly stopped flying. The collision knocked one of the B-47's engines half off its mounting and tore a hole in the wing, and the great bomber fell out of the sky. It plunged from 38,000 feet toward the earth, and in the cockpit, Richardson wrestled a machine that no longer wanted to answer him. He would remember the instant of the impact for the rest of his life.
All of a sudden, we felt a heavy jolt and a burst of flame out to the right. We did not know what it was. We thought maybe it was something from outer space, but it could only be another plane. Howard Richardson, recalling the collision, 2009.
His crew had ejection seats of their own, and every second the bomber fell brought the ground closer. But Richardson made a gambler's decision. He told his men to wait.
I told them, do not hit the ejection seats just yet. I am going to see if we can fly. Major Howard Richardson, in the cockpit over Georgia, February 1958.
Somewhere around 20,000 feet, the falling stopped. Richardson caught the wounded bomber and dragged it back into level flight. One engine hanging, the wing torn open, but flying. He and his crew were alive. And now they had a new problem, one that weighed 7,600 pounds and sat in the bomb bay beneath them. A B-47 was never built to land heavy, and Richardson's was crippled. To bring it down at the nearest runway with a hydrogen bomb still aboard was to risk everything. A hard landing, a fire, or the detonation of the hundreds of pounds of conventional explosive packed around the weapon's core. Richardson and his crew requested permission to do what Strategic Air Command doctrine had prepared them for. Permission came back, and they would get rid of the bomb.
The tactical doctrine for Strategic Air Command gave me the authority to get rid of it, for the safety of the crew. That was the number one priority. Colonel Howard Richardson, 2009.
He turned the bomber out over the coast, toward the dark water off Savannah, and brought it down to about 7,200 feet, holding a speed of roughly 200 knots. Then he opened the bomb doors and let the Mark 15 fall. The crew watched for the flash of a conventional blast when it struck the water. None came. The bomb went into the shallows of Wassaw Sound, near Tybee Island, and vanished beneath the surface without a sound they could hear. Lightened and steadied, Richardson flew on to Hunter Air Force Base and set the broken bomber down so smoothly that every man aboard walked away. For that landing, the Air Force gave him the Distinguished Flying Cross. By any measure, Howard Richardson had done something remarkable. He had saved his crew, saved his aircraft, and kept a crippled bomber from carrying the weapon into a crash at an American airbase. But in saving everything else, he had handed the sea a hydrogen bomb, and now the United States had to go and get it back. The search began the very next morning, on the 6th of February. The Air Force sent in its 2,700th Explosive Ordnance Disposal Squadron, and the Navy gave them close to 100 sailors. They came with handheld sonar and with galvanic drag lines and cable sweeps that they hauled back and forth across the bottom of the Sound, trying to snag 7,000 pounds of steel somewhere in the mud and the murk. Wassaw Sound did not want to give the bomb up. It is a shallow, restless place where the tides run hard and the rivers pour silt into the sea, and where the water is so clouded that a diver can lose sight of his own hands in front of his face. The bomb had gone in fast and heavy, and the mud had closed over it. Week after week, the crews dragged the Sound, and the sweeps came back empty. They searched through the rest of February and into March and on into April. On the 16th of April, 1958, after nearly 10 weeks, the military called it off. The most powerful nation on Earth had dropped a hydrogen bomb into its own coastal waters, thrown 100 men and every tool it possessed at finding it, and failed. In the plain language of the official record, the weapon was simply gone. The Air Force's official summary reduced the failure to one stark sentence. The weapon was not recovered, the search was terminated, and the bomb is considered irretrievably lost. And there the story might have ended. A lost bomb, a brave pilot, a closed file, except for one question that would not stay buried with the weapon. Was it a real bomb? A Mark 15 was a thermonuclear device, but a thermonuclear device is not a single, simple object. At its heart sits a nuclear capsule, a core of plutonium, and without that core, the weapon cannot begin the chain reaction that makes a mushroom cloud. The Air Force has always insisted that on Richardson's flight, that core was not aboard. Their evidence is a single piece of paper. Before the flight, the aircraft's commander signed an Atomic Energy Commission custodian's receipt, a form numbered AL-569, that recorded exactly what was placed aboard. And on that form, in the space where the nuclear capsule should be accounted for, the weapon's core is marked with one deliberate word. The receipt recorded, "Capsule, simulated." In its place, the form listed a lead cap of 150 pounds. The document was signed on February 4th, 1958, the day before the flight. If that receipt is true, then the thing in Wassaw Sound is a ruined weapon. Hundreds of pounds of high explosive and a mass of enriched uranium, dangerous but incapable of a nuclear blast. For years, that was the official and comforting answer. And then, in 1966, a senior official contradicted it to the face of the Congress. Testifying about America's lost nuclear weapons, the Assistant Secretary of Defense, W.J. Howard, described the Tybee bomb in words that meant the opposite of the receipt.
The Tybee Island bomb was a complete weapon, a bomb with a nuclear capsule. Assistant Secretary of Defense W.J. Howard, before the Joint Committee on Atomic Energy, 1966.
So which was it? The honest answer is that we do not fully know, and that the weight of the evidence leans toward the receipt. Records of the Strategic Air Command show that in February of 1958, the aging Mark 15 bombs on these training flights were not authorized to carry their nuclear capsules. The safer, sealed pit weapons that flew fully armed would not arrive until that summer. Most historians now believe Richardson told the truth, and that the core was lead, not plutonium. But W.J. Howard's words remain in the record, never retracted. And even the gentler possibility, a bomb packed with high explosive and enriched uranium, lying in the mud off a public beach, was never a comfortable thing to leave alone. As the decades passed, the bomb sank deeper, into the silt, and into legend. By 2001, a Department of Energy hydrographic survey estimated that it lay buried under 5 to 15 feet of mud and sand somewhere on the floor of the Sound. Then, in 2004, retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Derek Duke went looking for it on his own, trailing a Geiger counter behind his boat across the water. In one small patch, no bigger than a football field, his instruments found radiation running several times higher than the surrounding sea, and for a moment, it seemed the lost bomb had been found. But when the Air Force and its scientists examined the site, they offered a quieter explanation. The Georgia seabed is naturally laced with a mineral called monazite, which gives off a faint, harmless radiation of its own, and that, they concluded, was all Duke's counter had heard. No bomb was recovered. A few years later, a hoax raced across the internet claiming that divers had found and removed the weapon. It was entirely false. The bomb stayed exactly where it had been since 1958, silent under the mud, while shrimp boats dragged their nets across the water above it, season after season. The government's position settled into something strange and permanent. The safest thing to do with a lost hydrogen bomb is to leave it lost. Disturbing it, the Air Force argued, was more dangerous than letting it lie. And so the people of coastal Georgia were asked to do a very peculiar thing, to go on swimming and fishing and raising their children beside a sound with a thermonuclear weapon at the bottom of it, and simply not think about it too much. The man who put it there understood that better than anyone. Near the end of his long life, Howard Richardson found that the accident had never really let him go.
I have been living with it now for 51 years. We had an accident, and I landed the aircraft safely. I thought that would be the story. It is not the story. Everything is about the nuclear weapon. Colonel Howard Richardson, 2009.
Howard Richardson died in 2018, honored as the pilot who saved his crew. The bomb he dropped has now been missing for more than 65 years, longer than most of the people who tell its story have been alive. It was one of the most destructive machines humanity ever devised, built to erase a city in a single instant. And it was lost by accident in the shallows off a summer beach, and then allowed to stay lost because finding it seemed worse than losing it. Somewhere out in Wassaw Sound tonight, under the mud and the tides and the working boats, it is still there, a piece of a Cold War that never quite ended, waiting in the dark. America built a weapon to hold off the end of the world, and then let the sea swallow one of them, and looked away. The bomb off Tybee Island keeps its silence still, buried in Georgia mud, ember, and then ash.